If you're planning for retirement, you've probably heard the rule of thumb that you'll need 70 to 80% of your pre-retirement income to maintain your lifestyle. But here's the surprising truth. Most people actually spend as much or more in the first decade of retirement as they did in their final working years. In reality, over half of retirees experience a spending surge in early retirement. This is completely normal, but if you're not prepared for this reality, it could permanently damage your retirement security. I'm here today to walk you through exactly why the go-go years of retirement are more expensive than most people plan for, and what you need to do to protect your financial future. Chapter 1. What are the go-go years? Retirement isn't one long, steady phase. Financial planners typically divide retirement into 3 distinct spending periods: the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. The go-go years are those first 5 to 10 years of retirement, roughly your 60s into your early 70s when you're newly retired, generally healthy and eager to do all the things you've been putting off during your working years. This is when travel happens, when home renovation projects get completed, and when discretionary spending on dining out, hobbies, and entertainment reaches its peak. The slow-go years come next, and those are typically your mid to late 70s when activity levels naturally decline and total spending falls more noticeably. Finally, the no-go years, usually your 80s and beyond, and those are characterized by low discretionary spending, but often higher healthcare and long-term care costs as a percentage of your overall budget. What's fascinating about these phases, if you're a retirement nerd, is that they follow what's known as the retirement spending smile. It's actually a U-shaped curve where expenditures peak initially during the go-go years, dip during the slow-go years, and then rise again later due to healthcare expenses. For instance, a household starting retirement at $100,000 in annual spending might see real spending drop by nearly 26% to about $74,000 by age 84, before potentially increasing again. Understanding this pattern is absolutely critical because most retirement calculators and planning tools often assume steady inflation-adjusted spending throughout retirement, but that's simply not how real retirees actually spend their money. Chapter 2, the healthcare surprise that hits early. One of the biggest expenses retirees underestimate in those go-go years is healthcare. According to Fidelity's 2025 retiree healthcare cost estimate, a 65-year-old retiring in 2025 needed an average of $172,000 just for healthcare and medical expenses throughout retirement, more than a 4% increase over 2024. Other sources estimated even higher numbers, about $275,000 for a healthy 65-year-old man and $313,000 for a woman over their remaining lifetime with traditional Medicare and Medigap coverage. Here's what catches people off guard. These costs don't wait until you're 85. They start hitting in your 60s. Medicare premiums, deductibles, and copays add up quickly. Dental, hearing, and vision care, which Medicare doesn't cover, become more necessary. And if you retire before age 65, you'll need to bridge the gap, which can significantly cost more than most people budget for. Nearly 2/3 of pre-retirees underestimate their healthcare costs in retirement. Only 27% think they'll ever need long-term care, yet about 70% of people turning 65 will actually need some form of it. The median cost of a private nursing home room hit about $127,000 in 2024, and long-term care insurance for a healthy 60-year-old averages between $2,600 and $4,500 per year, depending on gender. Chapter 3, travel and lifestyle inflation in early retirement. Beyond healthcare, the go-go years bring what I call lifestyle inflation in retirement. After decades of working, many new retirees want to finally check items off their bucket list. Business class flights replace economy. Week-long vacations become month-long adventures. There are cruises to book, national parks to visit, and grandchildren in other states to go see regularly. While it's hard to pin down exact statistics on travel and spending increases, since every retiree situation is a bit different, most people tend to spend between 10 and 20% more in total during their first 5 to 10 years of retirement, specifically for travel and experiences, compared to their working years. This surge in discretionary spending is one of the top 2 categories, alongside healthcare, that cause surprise overspending in early retirement. But it's not just exotic vacations. It's the everyday lifestyle upgrades that add up. When every day becomes a Saturday, spending patterns shift. Dining out increases because you have the time. Hobbies that were squeezed into weekends now get full attention. And full budgets, home improvement projects that were delayed for years suddenly get greenlit. Entertainment subscriptions multiply, technology upgrades become more frequent, and many retirees find themselves helping adult children and grandchildren financially, whether that's contributing to education costs, helping with down payments, or simply being more generous with gifts. Now, all of these small increases compound into a spending level that often matches or exceeds pre-retirement income, contradicting the conventional wisdom that about 70 to 80% of your working income is all you really need. Chapter 4, housing costs don't disappear. Another major expense retirees underestimate is housing. Many people assume that once they retire, housing costs will drop significantly. Maybe their mortgage will be paid off or they'll downsize to a smaller home. But housing accounts for almost 30% of total expenditures among typical older married adults and close to 39% among non-married adults. Even more surprising, about 25% of married adults ages 65 and older are homeowners who still have mortgages. Beyond mortgage payments, there's property tax, homeowners insurance, and maintenance. Financial planners typically recommend budgeting 1 to 3% of your home's value annually just for maintenance and repairs. On a $500,000 home, that's $5,000 to $15,000 per year once you factor in major systems like roofing, and HVAC, and plumbing, and that exterior upkeep. In recent years, home insurance and property taxes have risen sharply in many states, especially in areas with higher weather risk. And labor and material cost repairs are often 20 to 40% higher than pre-2020 levels. Now, many retirees budget just a couple $1,000s per year for home upkeep, only to be hit with a $15,000 roof replacement or a $10,000 HVAC system failure in their first few years of retirement. Chapter 5. Inflation hits retirees harder. There's one more factor that makes the go-go years more expensive than anticipated, and that's inflation. And just not any inflation. Retirees face a unique inflation challenge because the categories they spend the most on often rise faster than general inflation rates. In 2025, the Social Security cost of living adjustment was about 2.5%, while the Consumer Price Index stands at about 2.6%. But certain retiree-impacted categories, like healthcare, might rise at double that rate. Over the last decade, Social Security benefits have lost about 20% of their buying power. What makes this particularly challenging is that most retirement income sources beyond Social Security aren't indexed to inflation. Pensions are often fixed, savings and investment withdrawals buy less each year, and because of this, over half of retirees end up cutting discretionary spending just to stay level. And 1 in 3 are now reducing essential spending as well. This inflation squeeze is hitting hardest during those go-go years when spending is already elevated, and it creates a perfect storm of higher expenses and that erodes purchasing power. Chapter 6, the consequences of underestimating. So what happens when you underestimate spending in those early retirement years? Well, first, there's sequence of returns risk when you're taking larger withdrawals from your portfolio during the early years of retirement, especially if those years coincide with a larger market downturn. You see, you lock in losses on a shrinking account base. Even if the market recovers later, your portfolio may never fully recover because you've sold too many shares at depressed prices. And this can have a very similar effect as just extending your retirement. I mean, extending retirement by just 5 years can increase the risk of depleting your savings by 41% if we use historical market returns. When they use lower forward-looking assumptions, that same 5-year extension boosts the risk of running out of money by more than 300%. So in many cases, you can adjust your lifestyle and spending to push back against these stats, but that's not the goal here. In fact, 1 in 3 retirees says they've already spent too much of their retirement savings, and over 40% say they don't have enough savings for a comfortable retirement. They've had to reduce their standard of living, or they're worried that they're going to outlive their savings. These aren't just statistics, they're represented by real people who underestimated their expenses, particularly in those early critical years, and they're now facing real difficult financial realities. The go-go years of retirement should be some of the most enjoyable and fulfilling years of your life, but they require careful planning and realistic budgeting. If you're within 5 to 10 years of retirement, now is the time to stress test your plan against these higher early year spending patterns. You want to model scenarios that include elevated travel and lifestyle spending, realistic healthcare costs, including pre-Medicare coverage if you're retiring early, proper maintenance budgets for your home, and the impact of inflation on your purchasing power over time. A comprehensive retirement plan should account for the retirement spending smile. Remember that U-shaped smile. Higher spending in the go-go years, declining expenses in the slow-go phase, and potential increases later for healthcare. If you'd like help creating a retirement plan that reflects the reality of how you'll actually spend money in retirement, I invite you to schedule a call with our team through the link in the description. Let's make sure your go-go years are everything you've dreamed of, without the financial stress that comes from underestimating what they'll actually cost.